Just in the last few hours tonight, a federal judge in Minnesota, a Trump appointee, has issued an order holding the administration in contempt for disobeying a court order in an immigration case. A federal judge finding that the federal government is in contempt. That is notable and unusual enough. But this is the second time the Trump administration has been found in contempt in the space of a week. Just a few days ago, another federal judge in Minnesota held a DOJ prosecutor in contempt in a different immigration case. She actually ordered the prosecutor to pay a $500 daily fine until the Justice Department started complying with her orders in that case, which they finally did the next day. That sort of thing has a way of getting their attention. But this is becoming a theme, and I think this is really important. Everybody said at the outset of Trump's second term that it would be a bright red line in terms of a slide into authoritarian rule in this country.
All right, folks, Adam is here, so let's get started. Judge James Boasberg sat on the federal bench and openly discussed using judicial power, contempt sanctions, raw court authority to end Trump's presidency. Not impeachment, not the 25th Amendment. A federal judge saying directly, "Keep defying us and we have the authority to remove you." That's not a hypothetical. That's not fiction. That happened. And Trump is terrified because he knows Boasberg means it.
Developing this morning, a federal judge who has repeatedly issued rulings against Trump's deportation plans is facing growing calls for impeachment. Judge James Boasberg was appointed by former President Obama and is currently serving as the chief judge of the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. After Tren de Aragua members were deported over the weekend, he issued an order to turn those planes around.
All of the planes, subject to the written order of this judge, departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
The actions of the Departments of Justice, Homeland Security, and Defense were not in conflict with the judge's order. But at the same time, it is also true that the judge's order was patently unlawful. Beyond unlawful, it was an outrageous assault on the Constitution, an outrageous assault on the sovereignty of the nation, and on democracy itself.
Let me take you inside what happened, because this is unlike anything in American history. A federal judge presiding over hearings related to the obstructed Epstein files and the Mar-a-Lago classified documents made a stunning statement from the bench. He said that if Trump continues to defy court orders, if he keeps directing officials like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi to obstruct justice, there are removal mechanisms available. Removal mechanisms.
The administration is set to face off in court with the judge that Trump has threatened with impeachment if he doesn't sign off on Trump's immigration crackdown. Justice Department attorneys will go before federal judge James Boasberg and argue that the Trump administration did not violate his orders when they used the Alien Enemies Act to deport accused Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador. This hearing could lead to an unprecedented showdown between the president and the judiciary.
Those were the judge's exact words. He is talking about physically removing Trump from the presidency through judicial action. And this did not come out of nowhere. Trump has been defying courts for months, obstructing Epstein file releases through Bondi and Patel, refusing to comply with deportation injunctions, blocking court-ordered releases of information. Over and over, courts issue orders, and Trump either ignores them or directs his officials to defy them. And judges have had enough.
Yeah, John, nearly a week after the deportation of those 200-plus Venezuelan nationals, the legal battle has metastasized into something quite different, into questions over whether the president intends to follow or defy orders from judges across America.
Before the unannounced deportation of 200-plus Venezuelan nationals, including suspected gang members, few had ever heard of James Boasberg. But as the week ends, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court in Washington is now at the center of a potentially landmark standoff with the Trump administration. Again today, Boasberg and the deported men were blasted by the president.
They're bad people. We don't want them in our country. We can't let a judge say that he wants them. You know, he didn't run for president. He didn't get much more than 80 million votes. And we just can't let that happen.
Before we go further, let me remind you of what happened that set this stage. An appellate panel of 29 federal judges, every single active judge on that circuit, issued an en banc ruling overturning Trump's immunity protections. 29 judges, Republicans and Democrats, Trump appointees and Obama appointees. All of them unanimous. Every single one.
Donald Trump was in court yesterday, watching his lawyers take tough questions from an appeals court over Trump's claim of presidential immunity from charges that he tried to overturn the 2020 election. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas is tracking the case. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. It's easy to forget these prosecutions of Donald Trump are historic in nature. No former president has ever been charged with crimes after leaving office. And Tuesday, a critical hearing sought to address the question of whether a president has unlimited immunity while in office.
They said Trump does not have immunity from court orders. They said he can be held in contempt. They said accountability applies to him just like any other citizen. That ruling stripped away Trump's legal protections and fast-tracked accountability mechanisms, meaning courts can now move quickly to sanction Trump personally if he defies orders. They do not have to wait for impeachment. They do not have to wait for the cabinet. They can act judicially. And that is exactly what Judge Boasberg is signaling. He is saying, we have mechanisms, we have power. And if you keep defying us, we are going to use it. We are going to hold you in contempt. And if contempt does not work, we are going to remove you. Now, can a judge actually remove a president? That is the question everyone is asking. And the honest answer is that we are in a constitutional gray area. The Constitution establishes impeachment and the 25th Amendment as the two formal paths for presidential removal. Nowhere does it explicitly say that federal judges can remove a president. But the Constitution also establishes the judiciary as a co-equal branch with the power to enforce its orders. Contempt of court is a mechanism judges use to compel compliance. If someone defies a court order, judges can hold them in contempt, and contempt sanctions can include fines, imprisonment, and removal from positions that enable continued defiance. So the legal theory exists. The question is whether that power extends to the president. Can a federal judge hold the President of the United States in contempt? And if so, can that contempt result in removal from office? Historically, this has never been tested because presidents have generally complied with court orders, even when they disagreed, even when compliance was politically damaging. They complied because they respected the rule of law and understood that defying courts would trigger a constitutional crisis. But Trump does not operate that way. He defies courts routinely. He directs his officials to defy courts on his behalf. And that is pushing the judiciary into territory it has never been before. The 29-judge en banc ruling was the opening salvo. It was massive because it stripped away Trump's legal shield. For years, Trump and his lawyers have argued that he has immunity as president, that courts cannot sanction him personally, that he is above contempt charges while in office. And 29 judges, including Republicans and Trump appointees, said no. That is not how the Constitution works. The president is not above the law, and the ruling was en banc, meaning it was not just a 3-judge panel. It was every active judge on the circuit, and they were unanimous. Not a single dissent. That almost never happens. En banc rulings are rare. Unanimous en banc rulings are extraordinary. 29 judges agreeing that Trump can be held in contempt is a clear message from the judiciary. And the ruling specifically mentioned fast-tracking accountability mechanisms, meaning courts do not have to wait months or years to sanction Trump. They can move quickly if he continues defying orders. They can impose contempt sanctions immediately. They can escalate to enforcement mechanisms rapidly. That ruling set the stage, and now Judge Boasberg is following through. During hearings on the Epstein files and Mar-a-Lago documents, the judge made it clear that Trump is facing personal contempt for directing officials like Patel and Bondi to obstruct. And then Boasberg went further. The judge said that if Trump continues defying orders, there are removal mechanisms available. The judge did not specify exactly what those mechanisms are, but the implication is clear. Courts have power, and they are prepared to use it to enforce compliance, even if that means removing Trump from office. So what could those removal mechanisms actually look like? Legal experts are speculating. Some say the judge could issue an order declaring Trump in contempt and directing the Marshal Service to take him into custody. Others say the judge could issue an order removing Trump from office and directing federal officials to recognize the vice president as acting president. Either scenario would trigger a constitutional crisis because Trump would not comply voluntarily. The Secret Service protects the president. The military chain of command runs through the president. Federal agencies answer to the president. So if a judge orders Trump removed, who enforces it? And what happens if Trump refuses? That is the uncharted territory, and Judge Boasberg signaling that courts are considering these mechanisms is pushing toward a constitutional confrontation unlike anything in American history. And it is not just Boasberg. Reports have documented hundreds of threats against federal judges, and many of those threats were linked to Trump's rhetoric attacking judges as rogue. Trump has spent years undermining judicial legitimacy, calling judges enemies, saying courts are rigged, encouraging his supporters to view the judiciary as illegitimate. And judges are tired of it. They are tired of being attacked. They are tired of being threatened, so they are pushing back. The 29-judge unanimous ruling is part of that pushback. Judge Boasberg's removal signal is part of that pushback, and Trump sees it. He has been lashing out on social media, attacking Judge Boasberg, calling the judiciary rogue, saying judges are part of a deep state conspiracy to remove him from office. And honestly, he is not entirely wrong that judges are coordinating, but it is not a conspiracy. It is judges enforcing the law. It is the judiciary doing its job as a check on executive power. Trump keeps violating court orders, so courts keep escalating sanctions. And now we are at the point where a federal judge is openly discussing removal. That is how far things have deteriorated. That is how seriously courts view Trump's defiance. Let me connect this to the broader pattern of Trump's defiance across multiple cases. On the Epstein files, Trump directed Bondi and Patel to obstruct releases. Both are now facing contempt. Both could go to prison. But Trump is the one who gave the orders, so courts are saying, "We are going after you too." On the Mar-a-Lago documents, Trump defied subpoenas. He allegedly directed deletion of security footage. He moved boxes to hide documents. All of that is obstruction, and courts want Trump held accountable personally, not just his lawyers, not just his staff, him. On deportation orders, courts issued injunctions blocking certain deportations. Trump ignored them. He continued the deportations anyway. He directed ICE and CBP to defy court orders. And judges are saying, that is contempt. You do not get to ignore us just because you are president. On tariff refunds, the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs. The Federal Circuit ordered immediate refunds. Trump's administration asked for delays. Courts said no. And now Trump is facing the political and fiscal consequences of having to pay back a massive sum because he defied legal limits on his authority. Across multiple cases, multiple issues, multiple courts, the pattern is the same. Trump defies orders, courts escalate sanctions. And now we are at the point where judges are discussing removal. The Supreme Court is involved too. On one front, the court blocked Trump from firing the Federal Reserve Chair. Trump wanted her gone. He wanted control over Fed policy. But the court said, you cannot fire Fed governors for policy disagreements. That violates their independence. That ruling is part of the same pattern. Courts limiting Trump's power, saying he does not have unlimited authority, saying he has to operate within legal boundaries, and when he does not, there are consequences. All of this is happening while Trump is trying to govern, while he is trying to implement his agenda, while he is trying to prepare for the midterms. But instead of focusing on policy, he is fighting courts, fighting contempt charges, fighting removal threats. And it is taking a toll. His approval ratings are down, his agenda is stalled, his officials are getting arrested, and now judges are signaling that they might remove him from office. That is not a functional presidency. That is a presidency in crisis. Trump's response has been predictable. Attack the judges. He has been posting relentlessly, calling Judge Boasberg a rogue activist, saying the 29-judge ruling is a deep state conspiracy, claiming the judiciary is trying to overturn the election. But that rhetoric is not working anymore. Because when 29 judges, including Republicans and Trump appointees, rule unanimously against you, you cannot claim partisan bias. When multiple judges across multiple circuits are sanctioning you, It is not a conspiracy. It is accountability. And the public is noticing. Polling shows growing concern about Trump's respect for the rule of law, about his defiance of courts, about his attacks on judges. And that is hurting him politically. Let me break this down into what actually matters here, because Judge Boasberg signaling removal mechanisms is not just legal theory. It is a real threat that could fundamentally change American constitutional law and end Trump's presidency. Judicial removal of a president is constitutionally untested and would trigger an unprecedented crisis. The Constitution provides for impeachment and the 25th Amendment. It does not explicitly give judges power to remove presidents, but it also does not explicitly say they cannot. And contempt of court is a legitimate judicial power. If someone defies a court order, judges can sanction them. And those sanctions can include removal from positions that enable continued defiance. So the legal theory exists. The question is whether courts will actually invoke it. Judge Boasberg signaling removal mechanisms suggests courts are seriously considering it. That is not idle speculation. That is a federal judge warning Trump, "Keep defying us, and we will remove you." The 29-judge unanimous ruling stripping Trump's immunity is the foundation for removal. That ruling established that Trump can be held in contempt personally, that he is not above the law, that courts have the power to sanction him. And the fact that it was unanimous, 29 judges all agreeing, shows this is not partisan. This is the judiciary as an institution saying we will not tolerate presidential defiance of court orders. That ruling gives judges the legal basis to escalate, and Judge Boasberg's removal signal is that escalation. Courts are saying, we have stripped your immunity. We have established you can be held in contempt, and now if you keep defying us, we are prepared to remove you. Trump directing Patel and Bondi to obstruct is the trigger. Courts are not just going after subordinates, they are tracing obstruction back to Trump himself. Patel is frozen in court, facing arrest over the Epstein files. Bondi is facing dual contempt proceedings and potential prison time, and both were following Trump's orders. So courts are saying, you are the one directing obstruction, you are the one behind the defiance, so you are the one who faces consequences, not just your officials, you. That is what makes removal a possibility, because if Trump is personally directing contempt-worthy obstruction, judges can hold him personally accountable. And if holding him in contempt does not stop the obstruction, because he is still president and can just order more officials to defy courts, then removal becomes the logical next step. The hundreds of threats against judges show how dangerous Trump's rhetoric has become. Trump has spent years attacking the judiciary, calling judges enemies, saying courts are rigged, and his supporters have responded with threats, death threats, threats of violence, threats against judges' families. That is creating a crisis for the rule of law because judges cannot function if they are afraid for their safety. And Trump's rhetoric is directly causing that fear. So judges are pushing back, not just with rulings, but with signals like Boasberg's removal warning. They are saying, you have attacked us, you have endangered us, and now we are going to hold you accountable. This accelerates bipartisan removal talks. Judge Boasberg's signal gives Congress and the cabinet cover. If judges are saying removal is on the table, then impeachment or the 25th Amendment become more politically viable. Democrats have wanted to remove Trump for months, but they have not had Republican support. Now, with judges signaling that removal might be necessary, some Republicans might be willing to consider it because they can say, we are just following the courts, we are respecting judicial warnings. And the cabinet could invoke the 25th Amendment using similar reasoning. They could say, Trump is defying courts so severely that judges are considering removal. That shows he is unable to faithfully execute the laws. So we are removing him through the constitutional mechanism designed for this purpose. Trump's legal protections are systematically collapsing. The Supreme Court struck down his tariffs. Federal courts are blocking deportations. Courts are ordering Epstein file releases. Courts are threatening his FBI director and former attorney general with jail. And now courts are signaling that they might remove Trump himself. Every protection is falling, every shield is gone. And Trump is exposed to accountability in ways he has never been before. The political timing is catastrophic for Republicans. This is happening during the midterm campaigns. Republicans are trying to defend their congressional majorities, and instead of running on accomplishments, they are defending a president who is defying courts and facing removal threats. That is political poison. Swing voters do not like chaos. They do not like presidents who defy judges. They do not like constitutional crises, so Trump's judicial problems become Republican electoral problems. And Democrats are using this. They are running ads showing Trump's contempt, showing judges threatening removal, showing the chaos, and asking voters, is this the stability you want? Trump's attacks on judges are backfiring. He thinks attacking judges as rogue activists will rally his base. And maybe it does. But it also hardens judicial resolve. Judges do not like being attacked. And when the president attacks them, they push back harder. So Trump's rhetoric is escalating the conflict instead of diffusing it, and that is making removal more likely, not less. The Supreme Court blocking Trump from firing the Fed chair shows that limits on presidential power are being enforced across the board. It is not just obstruction of justice issues. It is also separation of powers, judicial independence, Fed independence, limits on executive authority. And all of those limits are being enforced by courts. Trump keeps pushing boundaries. Courts keep pushing back. And the cumulative effect is a presidency that is constrained in ways Trump never expected. If Trump is actually removed by judicial action, it would be the most significant constitutional event in American history, more significant than Nixon's resignation, more significant than any impeachment, because it would establish that courts have the power to remove presidents who defy them. That would fundamentally reshape the balance of power between branches. It would make the judiciary more powerful. It would make the presidency weaker, and it would set a precedent that future presidents could not ignore. The question now is whether courts will actually follow through. Because signaling removal and actually removing are very different. Judge Boasberg has warned Trump. But will the judge actually issue a removal order if Trump continues defying courts? That is the test. And we are about to find out, because Trump is not going to start complying. He is going to keep defying, keep obstructing, keep directing his officials to ignore court orders. And at some point, judges will have to decide, do we actually remove him, or was the warning just a bluff? Trump's presidency is being consumed by legal battles instead of governance. He should be focused on the economy, foreign policy, his domestic agenda. But instead, he is fighting contempt charges, fighting removal threats, fighting to keep his officials out of jail. That is not governing. That is survival mode. And voters see it. They see a president who is overwhelmed by legal problems of his own making. And that makes him look weak, not strong. So here is the bottom line. Judge Boasberg signaling removal mechanisms is a watershed moment. It shows that the judiciary is prepared to take unprecedented action to enforce court orders against a defiant president. Combined with the 29-judge unanimous ruling stripping Trump's immunity, the arrest and contempt proceedings against Patel and Bondi, and the systematic judicial blocking of Trump's agenda, we are seeing a constitutional confrontation that could end Trump's presidency through judicial action. The legal theory exists. The judicial will exists. The pattern of defiance exists. The only question is whether courts will actually pull the trigger. Will they actually issue removal orders if Trump continues defying them? And based on how aggressively judges are escalating, based on Judge Boasberg's explicit warning, based on the 29-judge unanimous ruling, the answer might be yes. Courts might actually try to remove Trump. And if they do, we are in completely uncharted constitutional territory where the balance of power between branches is being rewritten in real time. Trump's fears are growing because he knows this threat is real. He knows judges are serious. He knows his immunity is gone and his legal protections have collapsed. And he knows that continuing to defy courts could result in his removal from office through judicial mechanisms that have never been tested in American history. That is why he is lashing out. That is why he is attacking judges. That is why his social media posts are increasingly desperate. because he sees what is coming. He sees judges coordinating, he sees removal on the table, and he does not know how to stop it, because the only way to stop it is to comply with court orders, and Trump cannot do that without exposing himself and his associates to the accountability he has spent years trying to avoid. So we are headed for a collision. Trump versus the federal judiciary, defiance versus enforcement, and someone is going to lose. And right now, based on how courts are escalating, it looks like Trump is the one who is going to lose.